Hi, everyone. I'm excited to be here today to talk to you about some of the miracle stories that are happening right here in our own city, in our own state, every day. My name is Tony Kausha, and the title of our show is Tony's 50,000 Coincidence Miracles. Please note, this show is not about religion, and we're not trying to change anyone's religion, and we're not trying to get you to join any religion. It's just about miracle stories. I don't know of any religion on the planet that doesn't talk about miracles. That's why religions begin, because they have something that's telling them there's really a God. But we're not going to get into that. We're going to just talk about miracles and leave the decisions about all that up to you. So we don't care what religion you are. We just want to talk about miracles. If you are an atheist, I think you'll enjoy the program as well, although I can't guarantee you'll remain an atheist very long after you hear many convincing stories, coincidence kinds of stories about miracles. You can email me your own stories if you wish. We'll try to use all we can on the show. I can't guarantee we will, depending on volume and time, but you're welcome to send your stories on to us, and we will mention them when we can. You can send them to the following email address. But please notice that if we do use your story, we won't mention your name. We'll keep you anonymous. And we suggest that in your story, when you send it to us, don't use your correct name. That way anyone listening will not be able to figure out that it was you that sent the story in. The email address you can send your stories to is very easy to remember. It consists of 2 words and 3 numbers. The first word is Tony, spelled Tony, and the second word is and, spelled A-N-D, and the numbers are 777. So once again, the name is Tony and 777 at AOL.com. Well, let us begin. Our first miracle story today is about a woman and daughter who had been abused by her husband for several years. He had problems with alcohol and drugs. She kept praying and trying and supporting him every time he tried to improve, but the abuse continued. And then finally, he just abandoned both of them and left. And she has now, since then, moved on. She has met a wonderful man who is now her husband, and she thanks God every day for having saved her from the first marriage and now having her in a wonderful marriage. And this new husband is also very good and wonderful to her daughter as well. Our next miracle story is about a handyman and his wife, and I met both of them and they told me this story, handyman and his wife, and they have been taking care of a woman who's a shut-in. She's about 90 years old, and they've been taking care of her. Apparently she's a neighbor. And one morning, the handyman usually stops by about midday every day because it's convenient for him to do that. But this one particular morning, him and his wife were going on a trip, so they decided to bring her lunch, a pasta that was made as a lunch, and bring it to the woman at 8:30 in the morning before they left for their trip. And so he went over there at 8:30 in the morning, and she was up and she saw him coming up her driveway, so she walked out to meet him, and she stumbled and tripped on some acorns in the driveway, and she fell down and banged her head and hurt her back. And while he was trying to minister to her and help her, 2 nurses were driving by in a car, and they pulled into the driveway to see if they could help, and they did some immediate first aid, which helped her tremendously. So the man who saw all this happening said it was totally miraculous that he was there and that the 2 nurses had stopped immediately, because if the time went on, it could have been a fatal accident. I guess apparently she must have been bleeding as well. Our next story is from a woman who had not been practicing her religion or her faith for many years, and she was having some problems in life, and one of her friends gave her a rosary and encouraged her to get back to her church and get back to her religion. And she did. She went back and she started experiencing great things happening to her in her life. And so she decided that she saw in a magazine, she saw a Christmas crèche, the Christmas manger scene, and she decided to buy that, and she was going to take it to a priest to be blessed. And so she had ordered it. And then one day after that, she was working 2 jobs, and so she had a break during the day. She decided to, since she was working at home, she decided to take a nap. So she took a nap, and she says that she doesn't remember her dreams normally, but this dream was very vivid and very real. When she awoke from it, it seemed like it was more real than a dream. But she had dreamed about one of her relatives with her, and a priest dressed in white approaching her, a very friendly priest approaching her, and he reached out for something, like he was asking her for something that she had, and she woke up. Just at that point, she woke up. She heard the doorbell ring, so she got up to go to the door, but there was nobody there. But she saw that the box was a box had been delivered, and she opened it, and sure enough, it was the manger scene, the crèche, the Christmas scene. So she took it immediately that day to her local church to be blessed by a priest, and she told the story to the priest. And apparently he looked a little bit like the priest she saw in her dream. Not exactly, but apparently close. And so she shared the story with the priest, and he was impressed and delighted to hear the story as well. I think what's important in this story is that her faith was restored. I mean, she went back to praying. Somebody gave her a rosary. She's devoted and dedicated to have this manger blessed by a priest. I mean, those are steps that are somebody who's practicing their faith. A lot of people buy mangers and creches and do not get them blessed. So the evidence is there that she was, sincere and serious about practicing her faith. And I think that's why she got this wonderful dream. And then right after she wakes up, the doorbell rings. I mean, all the clues are these coincidence miracles happening. She gets the dream, then she hears the doorbell, and then it is the manger. And now she knows why she's dreaming about a priest in a white vestment, because in the dream he was dressed in white. And they usually are wearing something like that in white when they are blessing objects for people. Our next miracle story is from a woman who went to visit a friend who had relocated to Austria. They were very close friends, and now that her friend relocated to Austria, I guess they communicate, by email and texting, etc. But decided to take a vacation and go visit her friend in Austria. And she tells us it's a tremendous miracle, and here's what happened. While she was in Austria, she had a liver failure, and it was crucial that she get a transplant immediately. So she immediately went on the donor list in Austria, and she got a donor almost like the same day or the next day. And if she was in the United States, apparently she found out that in the United States, if she was here, she would have been on a donor list for a long, long time. I guess the matching process, etc., wouldn't have worked for her. She probably had some unique blood or something, but she's positive that this idea, this inspiration she had to go to Austria to see her friend was not just only for that, but it was because God was inspiring her that she had to be in Austria in order to have this miracle and survive. What a tremendous, wonderful miracle story that is about coincidence miracles. And also evidence and proof that God sends us ideas and inspirations to get us to where he wants us to be. Our next story is from a couple who shared that the woman was pregnant, and during the process of her pregnancy, it was discovered that the doctors said that she was going to have conjoined twins, which means that their bodies would be connected, and sometimes that can be fatal, and sometimes they can perform surgery to disconnect the children. But oftentimes it could be fatal. And in this case, the doctor's diagnosis was that, or the prognosis was that the children were not going to survive the surgery. They might survive the birthing process, but they weren't going to survive the surgery of disconnecting their conjoinedness. And so, this is terrible news for a mother to have to hear while she's pregnant and then live with the process, go through the process of pregnancy. And so the whole family began to pray when they heard this news because, not for any other reason except they're telling me for their sadness that the children were probably not going to survive. So they were asking for God's will to be done. And that's what their prayer was all about, that God would, spare the children. And lo and behold, when the time came for delivery, the children were actually delivered, and they were not conjoined at all at the delivery, at the point of delivery. That a miracle had happened from the point where the doctors had surmised that the twins were conjoined. So this is a tremendously powerful, wonderful miracle. Our next miracle story is about a woman who tells us that she was driving through a fairly good-sized city, and she had stopped at a red light in the city, and it was a busy city. She stopped at the red light, and when the light turned green, she heard a beeping sound from the car behind her. For some mysterious reason, she said, instead of stepping on the gas as one person would normally do. I mean, if you're at a red light and you're the first car, and when the light turns green, you hear a horn, the first thing you would do is step on the gas because you think that the people behind you are telling you to, move ahead and move along, because she was holding up traffic. And she didn't say she was holding up traffic, but what she relates to us is, for some mysterious reason, her impulse, her instinct, and let's call it an intuition, she gets inspired not to step on the gas, but to step on the brake. And she relates to us how this was a tremendous miracle, because just then, as she was stepping on the brake, she saw a car coming down the road and went right through the light. Apparently, the car coming down the road now had a red light because her light was green. And this car went right through the center of town at about 80 miles an hour. It was like, instead of seeing the car, she just heard the breeze. And so she relates the story to us that what was so miraculous, and she's confirming that we do get ideas and inspirations from God that act on us and cause our instincts to operate in certain ways, that she knows that God had intervened, because normally she would have stepped on the gas, and in this moment, for some strange reason, she stepped on the brake instead, and she would have been the first car out there to get hit at about 80 miles an hour. Our next miraculous story is about our radio show, because there was one evening where I got inspired one day to put the news on early. I normally don't do that, but I was inspired to turn the radio on at 4:45 p.m. instead of waiting until 5 p.m. And so I was inspired to do that, and I felt God wanted me to do that, so I did. And normally I do this because when I do that, I hear wonderful spiritual songs. When God does that for me, He nudges me to turn the radio on. I wind up hearing some wonderful spiritual songs. But I turned the radio on, and what I heard was one of our past recordings for one of our shows was being aired on this radio station. That's because we're syndicated now, and our radio shows, I even get people emailing me from Denmark and Australia that they're hearing our shows in Denmark and Australia on occasion. And so what was so delightful for me was that God inspired me to turn the radio on because He wanted me to know that this radio station was airing our show 15 minutes before the news, which is certainly prime time for our show to get out there. My whole mission in life is to try to convince people to talk to God and be friends of God and know they can have conversations with God. So the more times it hits the airways, the happier I am. God bless you all. I'll talk to you next week.